Lisa, tell me, what should employers be looking out for with the new administration? Let's see how diplomatically you can address that.
Let me grab my crystal ball right here. I'm just kidding.
I know, exactly. I thought you were going to put on like a helmet and like a body armor, suit or whatever.
Welcome to Paychex Thrive, a business podcast where you'll hear timely insights to help you navigate marketplace dynamics and propel your business forward. Here's your host, Gene Marks.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Paychex Thrive podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Gene Marks. I've got two great guests on speaking with me today, Alicia Moberly and Lisa Reyes. They are both talent enablement partners at Paychex, here to talk about a webinar that they recently did. But before we even get into the details of the webinar, I just had to ask you guys, first of all, thank you both for joining. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, glad that you're here. Talent enablement partners. I'm not quite sure what that means. Who wants to tell me?
I can explain what we do. So we have a center of excellence that we are part of, and I'll break that down in a second. But our job specifically for talent enablement is, we are behind the scenes that support about 700 Paychex HR professionals. We help with resources, upskilling, providing solutions to basically support the client experience. So while it's a lot of talent partnership, we do have a lot of service strategy that we're working as well, combining those two forces behind the scenes to support our 700 HR business partners.
That's really cool. First, you have to know, I've never really been affiliated with anything near excellence. So I do give you guys hats off for being involved in something like this. And so just out of curiosity, can you give me an example or two of like the type of specific services you would provide to support Paychex's customers?
So it's a lot of specific different HR strategies and tactical work that we support our HR business partners that they take to every client engagement and interaction that they have. They have their own book of business with their clients, and we are here, whether it's some sort of HR solution, that you need to build like an HR infrastructure, if it's something more timely and relevant, so such as topics that we're talking about today, we provide resources, we provide engagement tools, to help support our HRBPs that support our clients.
We're getting ready. I've got an example for you.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
We are getting ready to roll out an initiative on workforce planning to our HR business professionals. So giving them the tools and resources that they need to help their clients with their workforce planning. So everything from a business continuity plan to change management to succession planning, things along that line.
That is great. Before the election, you guys did this great webinar, which I watched, which was all about navigating politics in the workplace. And there were a lot of amazing points that you gave. And the idea was obviously leading up to the election, there's all sorts of, things going on that could, create different types of good and bad work environments related to the election. So you were offering some advice and thoughts for business owners and HR people to help navigate that. But the election is over. So, number one is we're still post-election. I know a lot of people are still, absorbing the results of that election. And also, there's going to be another election in 2 years and another presidential election in 4 years. It's like not an issue that's going to go away. And to me, it's like this is the kind of thing that should be done. These are the kinds of rules and procedures, policies that a business should have all the time. And this should just something that you implement a month before an election. So for those of you that are watching or listening to this, watch the webinar. It's really good. There's a link to the webinar in the show notes. So let me go to you, Lisa, first. And I've got a list of these questions here. So the first question is this. Now that election day is over, what is top of mind for employers?
Yeah, so I think number one right now is going to be those post-election conversations in the workplace about both candidates, their people's views, differing views, and top of mind for employers is understanding civility. Now, I want to talk about a really important stat that The Society of Human Resources Management just came out with about a month or two ago. There's about 61 million workers in the workforce every day, and collectively there's about 202 million acts of incivility that they're dealing with every day. So I could just imagine how that number has grown right before the election and now afterwards.
That's an unbelievable stat, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm assuming that whatever acts of uncivility, however we define that, that number has probably been going up and will continue to go up even post-election, right?
Yeah, so I just think, I don't see this stopping anytime in the future. So this, even though the election's passed, it's something to keep top of mind for employers, their leaders, and their employees is, promoting and encouraging their managers and their employees to think before they act and be mindful about their communication, right? Try to find that those shared common goals or common ground so that we can unite on things and those types of topics. I think too, there's resources that employers can be providing. So an employee assistance program, also known as an EAP, if you need assistance, those types of resources are out there for employers and for their employees. Other things that we want to keep in mind are diversity and inclusion efforts. So maybe forming discussions in a safe place to have that inclusive feeling and foster, a supportive working environment for your employees.
That is great. All right, Alicia, let me turn to you with the next question that was asked. And first of all, let me preface this with a couple of facts. I mean, more than half of the workers in this country right now are either Gen Z or millennials, which means they're under 40. And in fact, many of them are under the age of 30. Some of these people this is your first election that they're going through, or maybe second. There's a lot of passion that's involved. Offsetting that is that more than half of business owners in this country are over the age of 50, So you've got like these younger workers that have gone through these elections, and this is like the first couple that they've been through maybe, and again, with some passion. Then you've got, the majority of business owners being run by people that are older, Gen Xers and boomers that have been around the block one or a few times, So Alicia, this question got asked. I think it's really relevant. I mean, what is the difference between an employer's political stance versus their tolerance?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you're right. There's so many generational differences in the workforce right now, so definitely a challenge for employers. But when we talk about an employer taking a political stance, we're talking about affiliation with a particular party or maybe a particular political topic. So when we talk about stance, that's what we're referring to. When we talk about tolerance, we're more talking about what an employer is allowing in their workplace in terms of political expression and conversations. So one of the things that we talked about in the podcast were some different approaches that an employer could consider when they're thinking about their tolerance level, right? So we talked about a high tolerance approach. So this would be maybe more appropriate for those larger companies, those larger corporations where there's a little bit more standard policies and procedures in place. There's professionalism, there's some respect, things along that line. So they're more comfortable, or maybe more comfortable, allowing more of those political conversations because they trust that their employees can do so in a decent manner, right? And upholding that respect, if you will. We also talked about a more neutral or middle ground approach where maybe they're limiting some behaviors when we're talking about politics, right? Like maybe, for example, they're not letting employees come in and handing out any sort of materials to support a particular party or something along those lines. When we think about that neutral approach. So just limiting some of that behavior in conversations. Then we talked about more of a low tolerance approach. So where companies are saying, we're really going to limit any sort of political expression or discussion in the workplace. So those were some of the different approaches that we discussed. They are by no means a one size fits all, but just things for employers to consider.
Sure. And this question can be back to you, Lisa, but really, or sorry, Alicia, but Lisa, you could jump in on it as well. I mean, sometimes it blows my mind. Like I live in the Philly area. My firm has about 600 clients all up and down, in the Philadelphia metropolitan area, north and south. And I can't tell you how many clients I go to. These are small businesses where the owners put political signs up on their lawns, or are clear in their affiliate, their political position. There was a story going around in Philly. There was a delicatessen, really well known in the main line of Philadelphia in Lower Merion, that had like a political ad filmed there for a political party, and that ruffled the feathers of others. I mean, to me, it's just, I don't know, like you're really asking for trouble, not only just with your employees, but your customers as well. And I guess for both of you guys, like as you're experts in this, so you deal with a lot of companies. I mean, do you encourage or do you discourage business owners, taking a political stand? I don't know if you want to start with that.
I can jump in. There's definitely a lot of viewpoints on this, right?
Yeah.
A lot of different opinions out there. I guess from our perspective, we're in HR. So I'm going to give this, from an HR perspective,
Right.
It's not against any law by any means to take a political stance or to not take a political stance as
Right.
a company. But I do think from an HR perspective, as a best practice, it's best that a company remain neutral, right? You run the risk either way of maybe alienating your employees, could even potentially go farther and alienate customers.
Yeah.
So, like I said, from that HR perspective, best practice, just remain neutral when we're talking about a political stance.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I've written on this before in the past, and just like keep politics out of business. That's my opinion. I mean, again, I don't work for Paychex, but that's just my opinion. And I think it's just to focus on your business, and you'll wind up upsetting less people. Lisa, Alicia had mentioned before about creating like political tolerance, or tolerating certain political activities within a business. And again, so we're looking forward, and there's going to continue to be political activity. It's never going to go away. So Lisa, who in the company do you think should be involved in coming up with like the policies for political, tolerating certain political activities? What should be tolerated? What is okay? What is not okay? Who, that kind of thing. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think it's going to depend on the business, right? A one-size-fits-all approach isn't going to work, but I'll give you a couple examples.
Okay.
So if you had a small business, predominantly, the owner's in charge and maybe does all the things, wears all the hats. So when it's small business, you're going to have the owner or the CEO heading that. Now, if you have a larger business, you're obviously going to have the CEO or the owner. You're going to have your department heads. You're going to have HR in that conversation. Right. And once those things are determined, it's great to have a roundtable discussion to hear other viewpoints other than just ownership. You'll then want to think about how are we going to communicate this and what's the strategy behind it. So what we usually recommend is starting from the top. So once that tolerance once that tolerance is decided upon, we're going to talk to the managers or the department leads or the supervisors, and that's going to trickle down to the employees. And then you're going to think about too, how do we communicate that to the employees? So what's the industry? What's the culture? Is it going to be one big meeting? Is it going to be a virtual meeting? Or in person? Is it going to be just something you post on your intranet? Is it going to be an email? So a lot of thought should go into your company culture, how leadership communicates, and that should be your strategy kind of behind how you decide who's going to take that tolerance decision and how it's going to be communicated.
Right. The communication of that obviously is critical once there's definitions of tolerance and the policy itself is created. But just to make sure I'm getting the takeaway from you, so clearly the business owner or owners should be involved in that, in that decision. But is there, would you recommend anybody else, like, as an owner of a company, I only have 10 people, so it's not good, but I'm thinking of clients of mine that might have 100 people or, 150 people, and they want to come up with this policy of, tolerance. A lot of business owners are like, well, I don't want all this on my head. I'd like to have a little committee here to get feedback from. Who would you choose? Like, what specific types of people or persons would you want to be on this sort of governing committee that would determine what those tolerance policies are?
I think like if you traditionally think of like who's part of an executive team, so I would say the CFO.
Right.
I would say you want your director of HR, whatever the title is for the head of HR. If you have an operations manager, I think you want that person in the meeting. And depending on how many there are, I don't think it'd be bad if you had your top leaders for different departments in the meeting as well. Because you're going to hear different voices in different areas of the business that might be beneficial to have all those voices in the meeting to address different areas of concern that you might not hear from one area that you would hear from the other.
Good. All right, that's good advice. All right, Alicia, let me turn to you. So, we've talked about creating these policies, determining what we're going to be tolerant about. We've talked about whether or not the business owner themselves should be talking politics or not, which I don't think they should be. But again, it's certainly not against the law. But okay, once those policies are created, it's time to enforce them. Now, these are policies on how people are dressing. Can they wear buttons, to work, or supporting their candidate, or what they might be saying in social media, or how they're conducting themselves in the office. How do you enforce this stuff, Alicia? Like, what do you recommend? Say somebody crosses the line or does something that's not in accordance with the policy. What would you tell an owner or an HR manager to do?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it can really be challenging, especially if you're dealing with, let's say, a company that has maybe not ever had any sort of formal policy, right? Like this is the first time that they're trying to introduce something of that. So it can definitely be met with some resistance, if you will, from the workforce. I'm big on transparency, right? Let's be transparent in why we're doing what we're doing. Why are we making the decision to implement these policies? What's it going to do? What's in it for us? What's in it for you? And so I think starting there is always a good idea. Obviously, I'm HR, so I think compliance is the first thing that comes to mind. What compliance obligations do we have as a company in terms of policies that are required from a federal, state, or local level? And just, again, being transparent and explaining that. I think also talking about how policies can really help to set clear expectations from both leadership and your frontline staff. And then I think also talking about how that plays into just an overall healthy workplace culture, right? Like we're establishing these clear and concise guidelines for you. It's going to really just help promote that.
I think it's a fair answer. And I think that's great. I don't know if we're being naive because, people are still going to come into the office and get into fights,
Sure.
or misbehave, Yankees, Mets, keeping politics out of this. But it's going to happen. And as owners and managers, I guess, we've got the policies, we've communicated the policies, we're going to enforce those policies. But, there are situations that's going to happen in the office that we need to, sort of throw cold water on or bring down the heat as it is. So I'm curious to both of you. I mean, Lisa, I'll ask you, what do you do when there's these conflicts that are going to happen they're going to happen regardless of policies? People are still going to be people. So, what advice would you have for us to sort of mitigate those?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. We do a lot of reporting and what our HR professionals are working on, and harassment's actually been on the rise leading up to the election, and I know it's going to continue to rise. And, and that's just what it is. Like if you focus on the actual issue, it's harassment, right? So I think sometimes we get paralyzed when we hear the word politics. Like you get an employee issue and it's two employees fighting about politics and you're like, oh my gosh, how do I deal with this? Because you hear the word politics and you're like, I'm frozen. And so just remove that politics out of it. And when we get down to it, it's harassment. So as an employer, what is your company's policy on harassment, right? So looking at that. Now, if you don't have a policy on harassment, let's talk about best practice. So best practice is going to be investigate the situation, right? Look at what your past practice has been. So trying to stay consistent in how you're dealing with employees that do have harassing behaviors or any claims that have come in, because that essentially is going to avoid also discrimination claims that could come up in the future. So again, I just think it's really important. Remove the politics, focus on harassment. How would you address that and move forward that way?
Another thing I think I'll add to that to just touch on too is starting with your leadership and making sure that they are trained and equipped to handle such situations, right? Like make sure they are first in the know about your harassment policy first and foremost. And then second, make sure they know what to do when they receive a report of some sort of conflict happening, or maybe they witness it themselves, making sure that your leaders are equipped to handle such situations.
This also gets back to my the comment or the conversation we were just having a little bit earlier about the business owners, because you guys are both saying about management and the owners getting involved and lowering the temperature a little bit. But again, if you're running a business and it's clear that you side with one thing politically, whatever that is, it's tough to come in as an independent, credible person and say, hey, everybody calm down, both sides are, whatever. Like, it's just, which is another reason why I always say to my clients, like, just try to keep politics out of your business. So at least it can also help you resolve issues as well, because people will at least observe you as being somewhat independent when you come and try and get involved. But it's great advice. We talked about employees. What about customers? I mean, this should be common sense, right? But like, I don't know, you're a purchasing manager and you're on the phone with a customer, or on a Zoom call and the customer has a different political opinion and starts talking politics. I'm assuming if you're a responsible manager, you're not getting into it with that, with that customer. But what do I know? I don't know. So what is your advice, Alicia? What would you tell clients when it comes to dealing with your differences in political opinions with your customers?
Well, you're right. It should be common sense. But I always fall back to, let's go back to our policies and our guidelines, right? Back to the basics, if you will. What are our standards of conduct? What are the expectations of our employees? Again, encouraging that neutral stance, if you will, and really just making sure that your employees understand the level of professionalism and respect that is expected from them. And really that comes down to, again, training and making sure that your leadership, knows these policies and procedures and is enforcing them consistently. I always suggest training on professionalism, maybe even a little on emotional intelligence along with this topic. Yeah. The other thing, though, that I think is important is you mentioned it too. Regardless of this, there's going to be things that happen, right? Like you are going to have conflicts that come up in the workplace. And just, again, making sure that your leaders are equipped and know to address them promptly and consistently.
Good. Lisa, I'm going to give you final word. And this is, I think, I don't know who asked this question, for the webinar, but man, I don't know what their motives were behind this, because it's a tough one. So Lisa, I'll throw it out to you. Lisa, tell me, what should employers be looking out for with the new administration? Let's see how diplomatically you can address that.
Let me grab my crystal ball right here. I'm just kidding.
I know, exactly. I thought you were going to put on like a helmet and like a body armor suit or whatever.
Well, I mean, there's definitely some things. So when we think of policies and how those are going to shift and obviously affect changing regulations. So a couple things come to mind. So in the past year, the National Labor Relations Board had put in place some stricter guidance on classifying workers as independent contractors. What we know about the administration coming in is it's been said that those might be a little bit undone and become a little bit looser on that. So that's something to be aware of. Wage and hour. I think this could be a tricky one, because we have the second, I guess we could call it like the second installment of the Department of Labor's overtime ruling. There was a jump in the salary threshold, so this affected a lot of workers and employers. So July 1st, 2024, the threshold went up to $43,000 and some change. And now January 1st, just 3 weeks before the new administration steps in, we're going up to about $58,600 and odd dollars. Don't quote me on the exact dollars on there.
Almost $59,000. You're right.
It's a significant jump. So is it likely that this could change? I'm going to say probably not, but again, don't have my crystal ball with me. I don't know, but it's something to have top of mind and thinking about, as well as the federal minimum wage. So the current administration and the Harris campaign said if they were to win, the federal minimum wage there was going to be a hike. The Trump administration was not on the same page as that. So something to be paying attention to, not just the federal, but state and local minimum wages, because those are going to have differing effects. Yeah. I also would mention this whole taxation on tips. So both parties were in favor for that. So I would say that's something, especially like industries like hospitality and restaurants, that they're going to want to be paying attention to that, because that's going to affect their tip workers. And there's a lot of those in those industries. And then other things, I think that we should just, employers should just be thinking about, like regulations on AI, immigration reform, and then paid leave, I think will be more likely affecting or being up to the states versus the federal level. So paying attention to your state and local regulations. So lots of stuff's probably going to be coming. Good. Maybe some will think not as positive changes. Depends on where you're located and of course your employee size. So just also paying attention to what's going to be applicable to your business. So
you did a great job with that question. That was pretty impressive. It's a minefield to kind of tiptoe your way through, and you handled it very, very well. Lisa Reyes and Alicia Mobley are both talent enablement partners with Paychex. We've been discussing their great webinar that they did just a few weeks ago, Election Year Navigating Politics in the Workplace. We've got a link to it in the URL for this show. It is every bit, if not more relevant now post-election than it was before the election. So I highly recommend taking a look at it. You'll learn a lot. It will help you manage what is a very tough environment when it comes to managing workers in such a heated area as politics. So both of you, thank you so much for joining. It was a great discussion. Really learned a lot, and I appreciate all that you do.
Thanks so much, Gene.
Thank you. Appreciate you having us.
Everybody, you've been watching and listening to the Paychex Thrive podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed it and got as much great information out of it than I did. My name is Gene Marks. If you need any advice or tips or help in running your business, please visit us at paychex.com/thrive and sign up for our newsletter. I promise you will not be disappointed. Thanks again for watching or listening. We'll see you again next time. Take care.
Do you have a topic or a guest that you would like to hear on Thrive? Please let us know. Visit payx.me/Thrive Topics and send us your ideas or matters of interest. Also, if your business is looking to simplify your HR, payroll, benefits, or insurance services, see how Paychex can help. Visit the Resource Hub at paychex.com/works. That's WORX. Paychex can help manage those complexities while you focus on all the ways you want your business to thrive. I'm your host, Gene Marks, and thanks for joining us. Till next time, take care.
This podcast is property of Paychex Incorporated 2024. All rights reserved.